What's up, everybody, and welcome to C++ programming tutorial number 5, right? Your host is Delmorex, the coder. Previously, we have been discussing about methods, and I kept on saying that we'll cover them in the future, right? So I wanted to introduce them in a way that makes it easy for one to fully understand, right? So in this tutorial, we're gonna start covering those concepts. So in this tutorial, we'll focus more on the methods. Reason why I chose method is because we wanna start learning how to create methods so that we can use them instead of repeating the same code over and over again. We want to practice, they call this dry, don't repeat yourself, right? So don't repeat yourself, rather use a function and call the function multiple times instead of you repeating the code over and over. Coding the same thing over and over again is not a good practice when it comes to programming, right? So the first thing that you want to ask yourself, or the first thing that you want to fully understand, is what is a method, right? So a method is a block of code that gets executed only when called. So basically, you define a method and then you call it in the main function. So the main function or the main method, you've seen the main method, it's always in every of our program. So you call that method, right? Then your code will get executed. So I want us to look at how one can actually go about defining a method before we actually go through the actual coding. So here's the syntax, right? So you start with the data type. So this is the type that your function, this is the type of the value that your function is going to return. I hope that makes sense, but it will make more sense when you get to the coding itself. So for now, just note that that data type is related to the value that this function is going to return. If you define that function to be a string, your return value should be of a string data type. If it's an int, it should be of an integer data type. I hope that makes sense. And then after that, you have the method name. So you name your method. You can, if you are in a math application, this will be the addition or add addition method, right? And then you have your statements for adding, and then after that you have your return value, which is going to be of integer if you were doing dealing with the math problem, either with a integer addition or float addition, right? Because you know you have numbers with decimals and numbers without decimals, right? Cool. So let's quickly discuss the types of methods that you can have. The first method you can have is a method without a return value. So this method does not return any value. It just display information and that's it. Cool. The second method, it returns a value. Now, you will recall that we have an input function, right? And then that input function reads value from the user. So you can return the input of something, right? So you can create a function that reads information from the input from the user. Instead of you always asking and implementing the code for getting the input, you just use the function. I hope that makes sense. Let's quickly just head over to the coding site and we type in methods.cpp. Cool. So the first thing is include IOStream, right? It's IOStream, and then we're going to be using standard namespace. STD, standard, not sexual transmitted disease, people, okay, int, right? And then it's main, right? And then you have that there, you can choose to have that. So basically, by definition, you have a return statement, right? You have a return statement. In this case, you can have 0, right? So 0 in terms of this method says that your code compiled successfully, right? So cool. Let's start off with the types, right? So you have a method that doesn't return any type, method without a return type. Why? Okay, I don't know what's happening. Okay, cool. And then you have a method with there we go. Cool. So the first thing you do, right, is to specify the type. So if you specify the type here, so if it doesn't have any return type, it's a void function, and then we can just call it display, and then we have open parentheses, then close space, and then that, right? And then after that, we're just gonna display information, right? The coda, that's what I'm gonna display, and then I end line, and then I print. And then after that, I'm gonna call a function which is display, right? Cool. Technically speaking, this should work because I have defined my method, then I'm calling it there. It should work, right? Let's check it out and see if it's gonna work. And as I am compiling this, can you pause the video and ask yourself this question: is this gonna compile or is not? If it's not gonna compile, what's gonna make it not compile? And there we go. So your display is not displayed in the scope. Why? Cool. So your compiler, when it starts reading your program, it reads from the beginning, right? And then it goes there. So by this, it knows that, oh, there are going to be methods you're going to be using from this library. Okay, cool. So you're going to be using the standard naming namespace, so that way you don't have to specify or use a certain format, because this can be a weird format, like you have to do std : and then see out. It's not a nice way. So to take care of that, you just use that, then you call ucout object as it is, right? Cool. And then it comes to the main method, which is always run, right? So this one always runs. It's not like this one's. I know the definition says that it's a method that only runs when called, right? But the main method is an exemption, because this one always runs, because that's what runs your code each and every time. So that one is always ran, which means that this function or this method somehow it's being called when you execute your program, right? And then you have display. Cool. So when it comes here, it gets confused because it doesn't know that function. So it has to first encounter the method before it calls that. So it has to know the method before, because now you're calling a method which is defined after the function that is running currently, right? So your compiler is confused. So you can either do this in two ways. The first way is to call this method there, or you can use this other trick, which I'm just gonna use, of method prototyping. So what prototyping or method prototyping is that you are making your compiler aware that later in my code, I'm going to define a method, right? And then I'm going to name it this, right? Then that way your compiler doesn't get confused. Ah, you told me about this function or about this method, right? And then it knows and it understands you perfectly well, which is one of the things you want to achieve, having a relationship with your code, right? Cool. So let's prototype. So it's the same thing. It's data type, function name, and then open close parenthesis, and then it's an end. So this is prototyping. So prototyping basically is just declaring your function but without the body. So you omit the body, right? If I run this now, this should work and the compiler shouldn't complain at all. And then we have that, and that's what we have, right? That's your first function that has no return statement. I know I'm supposed to have R there, but yeah, I made a mistake, but that's just a comment. Cool. So if you notice something there, your method doesn't have any parameter at all, right? So you can have a method that has a parameter and a method that does not have a parameter, right? So let's get to the part, this part. So it's the one with the return parameter, right? So since we already have int there, let's just use let's use what? A boolean maybe, or a char. I think let's use a char, right? So it's char, and then get letter, and then you have ch. No, we have to say char h, right? So the reason why we have that is because we want to return that char that we just passed there. And what we do is just return that h, and that's it, right? So there are a few steps we have to do as well, right? So the first thing we want to do, make our compiler know that we're going to have this function. So get letter, and then it has a parameter, so I'm going to have a parameter. I can name this parameter anything, but in this case let me just leave it as that. Cool. Then after that, we're just gonna call the function, right? So it returns a value. In order for us to see that value, we have to print the value that gets returned. And then we say get letter and line space. Cool. Now if we execute this, we're executing the previous one, right? So if you execute this, you will see you have letter then 1. Why? Because now this didn't compile the way it's supposed to. I said get letter, right? But the function I have there has to take in an argument, and this is one of the things that I also want to discuss, that people make a mistake. When you define a function, and if you have something inside the parentheses, those are parameters. When you call a function with parentheses, right? If your function has parameters, you pass an argument. So an argument happens. So an argument, or if you were to be given a code and they say what's the name of the arguments passed to your function, you just go to the function call, then you will know, this is what I'm passing to my function. So in this case, what I'm having is get letter, right? And then I open close parenthesis, and then I have char, and then so basically I don't have to pass that, I have to pass a definition. So let's just do a cool. And then if we run this and we create our button, cool, we should have that. That's letter then a. and that's basically your function. Rule number one, don't be afraid to make mistakes. If you get to be afraid to make mistake, you will never learn. Number two, take your time to understand the concepts. So I don't really cover much in terms of the theory because covering too much gets to be overwhelming. So in order for you to be able to understand, we just take it step by step. And I do hope you guys did understand and you guys did manage to follow through. If you didn't, then you can just revisit or rewatch the video until you understand, because programming is not really easy. It takes time, it takes effort. If you're willing to learn, you must understand something that without consistency you will never start, but most importantly without commitment. So without commitment, actually, why am I messing up this code? So without commitment you will never start, but most importantly without consistency you will never finish. If I was to start this YouTube without being committed to truly help people, regardless of how the views go, I was gonna be caught in this trap that okay, cool, so I'm not having any views, so I'm not gonna continue. So I was committed that regardless of how the views go or the analytics go, I'm gonna keep doing what I do, give tutorials, and even if it's just one that is there learning, as long as I know that I am helping someone else out there, I'm happy, because my mission is to help those who truly want to help themselves understand code and create amazing programs, right? Because once you get to understand the basics and understand your code, you can start designing whatever that you want to design. And that brings us to the end of this tutorial. I shall see you guys in the next tutorial next week, Tuesday. I do hope you enjoy this one and you will have a lovely week which is productive, and I'm out.